Okay, my name is Samantha Foley, and my presentation is on the effects of socioeconomic status on oral language. So, to begin, we'll start with socioeconomic. What does it mean? So it comes from two words. Socio is in social, and economic is in economics. So what that basically means is it's your social standing based on the things you have economically. And that includes, but is not limited to, your education, your wealth, status in class, and quality of life. Now, it is basically, the thing you have to remember about socioeconomic status is it's contrived. What that means is that it's your standing in society based on both what you think of yourself and what other people think of you. It's not like a hard and fast, yes, these people could be poorer. In that sense, the economic status is pretty set, but the actual social part of it is a socially contrived thing. So, how is oral language developed? So, oral language is basically developed when children are very young through exposure and then later awareness. So the more you talk to children, the more they're exposed, the more language they will learn, and the more vocabulary they'll learn. This in turn can cause communication loops. What that is you'll talk to a child, and then they'll talk to you, and it just keeps looping. Usually done through more of a question thing. Not question and answer, like yes or no questions, but things that actually foster communication, such as, that's a nice drawing, why don't you tell me about it? And then that can lead to the verbal mapping, and then eventually children get into the negation questions kind of thing. This is when you start to see children saying no, start questioning things, why, and then the more complex sentence structures. So, what does all this mean in terms of lower socioeconomic status and language? In general, people with a lower socioeconomic status expose their children less to different types of language, and they expose them to different language less in general. This could be due to the fact that they work a lot of single-family households, single-parent households, a lot less talking, a lot more working, and the amount of quality time. I know in my own family, because I was raised by a single parent, the amount of quality time we had just wasn't there. So the lower the socioeconomic status, studies have found the less time in general that they do have to teach language to their children. So, how does that affect their oral language acquisition? Well, for one thing, they have a lower memory and recall, and that really affects their vocabulary skills, because, you have to actually remember the words. Words start as just mimicking sounds, mimicking words. A lower language exposure, which we already talked about. Lower cognitive function tests. So these, should be noted, is kind of a gray area, because some of them that I found said this is absolute lower socioeconomic status, lower oral communication skills. But some of them have found this isn't always the case, and that is covered in a later slide, so we will get to that. And a lower vocabulary. They have found that children who come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are exposed to less vocabulary, and so their rich vocabulary skills aren't necessarily there. They have your basic words, but they don't go above and beyond. Now, this effect is only really prominent until age 9. So by the time a child reaches the age of 9, they believe, and there's not a lot of studies on it, but they've noticed that this gap sort of turns to close, and they believe it's due to exposure to other cultures, through school, through sports, through whatever it is that children do, and the more schooling and people they're exposed to, the lower that gap ends up becoming. So is it all bad? No. As we've said, this isn't a hard and fast rule. It depends a lot on the children themselves. Some children are just naturally very gifted, and they'll learn no matter what environment you put them in. Some people, their parents may be highly educated and highly involved, but they're still a lower socioeconomic status. Maybe they've lost their jobs. Maybe, They just can't find work. They've moved. School. The more people they're exposed to at school and the better the teachers they have, the more likely they are to be able to bridge that gap that socioeconomic status may have already created. And family dynamic, especially with families who are multi-generational, they're generally exposed more to different points of view and different words, because, my grandparents, for example, talk differently than I do. And all these things contribute to really lowering that gap between the socioeconomic statuses and how children do orally with their oral language skills. So what can you do as a teacher? Well, the biggest thing you can do is speak to them. And this starts very, very early on. You talk to them, you expose them to as many different words as you can. Don't always say, hey, you know what? Walk. Say things like, let's move slowly. Let's move with trepidation. That's a fun word. Probably not a toddler word, but introducing them to new vocabulary, things they don't always see. One of my favorite stories about this actually is we were going through picture books with my toddlers, and one of them knew what a buffalo was. Why? Because his grandparents took him to see buffalo. The more you expose them to new things, the better off you can do. Give them different play experiences. Change up your kitchen center. Change up your blocks. I did put on here, use appropriate concepts, though. Just because, yes, you do want to expose them to new things, and you want them to learn new vocabulary, but you also don't want to over-expose them and confuse them with things they're just not ready for. So using words like flabbergasted probably isn't a 4-year-old word, but excited. Excited's not bad. Confused. Things like that. Family involvement. So one of the ways we've talked about you can lower that socioeconomic gap in terms of oral language development is to really get families involved. Encourage them to read. Converse with their children daily and in a positive manner. Children, they don't always want to talk about, yeah, you had a rough day at work. But be like, what did you do today? Let them talk to you. And the earlier you talk to your children, the better off it's going to be. And then we, as teachers, can also share resources with them. On my last slide, I have the resources I used for this PowerPoint, actually. And these would be good articles to share with your parents. You might have to change some of the wording around, and explain some of them. The APA article was fantastic, very easy to read. And again, generations. So the more people that children are exposed to, the more language they will learn. So what if we don't? What does this mean later on in life? Yes, we've been talking about this is how they're going to learn language. And this is how they're going to do when they start speaking. Well, the better you speak, the more likely you are to have better job opportunities. You go in, you are interviewed, you sound intelligent, you sound educated. Even if you're not, the better you sound, the better you talk, the more likely you are to get a job. It also helps with the ability to read and comprehend written communication. So you start out with oral language. We read books to children out loud. They then start to take that oral language and connect it with, oh, that's what those things on the page mean. Those are words. The better they understand oral language, the better they're able to do reading. The more they can comprehend, because they already know what the words mean, they just don't realize those are the words. And it helps with peers. The better off children can talk, the better off they are with their peers. You see this all the time. Younger children have a very hard time communicating with their peers and are more likely to bite, hit, things like that. But as they get older, we encourage them, use your words. Use your words. Talk to your friends. Let them know that you don't like that. And that's part of the thing is they have to actually have those words and they have to have those abilities. And these are the resources. I did leave a couple of hyperlinks in there so that you could find them. as I said, the one from, let's see here, it's the third one down? No, it's the first one. The Children, Youth, Families, and Socioeconomic Status. That is from the American Psychological Association. Very easy to read article. Would be great to share with parents. You can print it. It said that you could. So, on that, I will leave you with these thoughts. Thank you so much.